Hi all, and welcome back to the Lunar Lander series of tutorials here on UnityCookie.com. In this video we'll be going over how to build up your actual game level. It should be lots of fun and plenty of good side paths to learn new things about Unity as we go, especially in regards to importing and setting up colliders and all sorts of things like that. So the first thing we need to do is check that everyone has all the files, of course, and in all the right places. Especially when working from a slightly more complex game like this, it's definitely important to make sure you've got everything set up just right. Get the foundation set properly for you. And before we do that, you might have noticed that the files have changed since the first tutorial, and maybe a bit confused why some of that has changed or anything's going on here. But no worries, everything from the previous tutorial is completely valid. I've just decided to go ahead and provide all the real, much awesomer, painstakingly handcrafted models that'll be in the full Mindlander game that I'm making as part of this tutorial, or originally, and this is coming from it. You can feel free to use any of these models, whoever you like, commercial or personal, if you feel like it, I guess. Just credit me is all I ask, and maybe even buy the game when it comes out. That would definitely be nice. So, let's see, you may have, I guess, just forged ahead and created all your own models, of course, which would be even better, I guess. Definitely a great way to go, especially since there's so much game dev going on these days. Top priority is definitely being original. So, if you've done that, that's great, and we'll definitely want to check through and make sure you have all the right assets and folders and such going on in here. So let's take a quick look at that, and at the same time we'll go over all about importing these custom assets, making sure they come in just right, setting a few options on them and such. So starting at the top with the asteroids here, and again, if you had all the previous files, they should be set up exactly like this, and you'll just need to if you're using the old ones and didn't create your own, you can actually just trash those and use the ones that come with this tutorial. If you have your own, just make sure they follow the same setup as all of these. Should be just a matter of, if anything's different, maybe changing a folder where they are in a folder at most. So inside of asteroids, we should have collision, materials, meshes, and textures. And then inside of meshes, you'll have, in this case, 4 different meshes, or however many you might have created, of course, if you have your own. And inside of textures, 5 different textures. Materials, there should be nothing in there yet. We'll get to that later. And in the collision, of course, 1 collision mesh for each of the actual visible asteroid meshes. So make sure we have all of those. And then for the import settings on these, on the collision files for each, just a couple small things. Make sure the scale factor is at 0.01. And this might change for you, I guess, depending on which 3D program you created it in. If you did it in Max, 3D Studio Max that is, according to the first tutorial in this series, where I said to build everything at 1 unit equals 1 centimeter, you'll definitely want to have this at 0.01. Go ahead and import it. I find the best way to do this, we'll do a test one here real quick. Just drag and drop it in, right into your hierarchy like that. And then take a look at it. And if you go and create game object, create other cube, and then check the size of that cube compared to your actual file, and just make sure that it seems about right. In this case, that's what I want, because this cube is actually exactly 1 meter by 1 meter in Unity's scale. So I can tell here this is about the right size for what I've got going on. So that's good. Just check yours, make sure it's at least close to the same, since we'll be using physics for the movement of the player ship and such. It's definitely, the closer you can get to that, the better. Otherwise, since we're using realistic physics, things will be a bit strange, of course, if your asteroids are only 1 inch by 1 inch versus this is 20 by 30 meters or something. So make sure it fits up pretty close to that. We can go ahead and delete these if you've brought them in like such. And so once you have one figured out, just of course set all the others to the same scale, and they should automatically come in as 0.01 for a scale factor. The only other thing you might want to worry about looking through here, we can move this down maybe to make that a little easier. For animations, we're going to turn that on to don't import. And actually a bit up above here under materials, we will uncheck import materials. We'll be setting up our own, and it just keeps things cleaner if we just do it ourselves that way. So again, scale factor, check and see if that's showing up okay. If not, bring that number up or down. And then you have the animations to don't import and uncheck import materials. So do the same. And here, of course, make sure you click apply as soon as you've changed it. So let me just do this to each one here. Animations don't import, materials off, scale factors automatically that. And I click on the next one, make sure I hit apply. There we go. There's also a apply button down on the bottom here if it makes it easier to visualize what's going on, just like that. Okay, so that is each of our collision materials, or sorry, collision meshes for the asteroids. Then we'll go down to the actual visible meshes. And same thing, scale factor, make sure it's the same for each. Make sure and then set your materials to not import, and the same thing for animations. Oops, wrong button there. Materials not import, and animations don't import. There you go. And the next. And the next. Okay, and lastly we have the textures. And any that you have in here, just make sure their texture type is on texture. And actually we'll change that just a bit. If you click on the texture and go down to advanced, since in our game we won't be actually scrolling in and out and viewing from any different distances, we can turn off generate bitmaps. And what this does is it stops it from generating smaller and larger versions of the map, which would be good if we have a 3D game, because as you get closer it'll show more high-res, a high-res version of the texture and a lower res as you go out, which is great for just performance reasons. But of course we have no need for it, and it also does make the file size just a little bit larger, and we want to try and keep that down. So you can go ahead and turn off generate bitmaps. And we'll just do that to each one. So select it, go down to advanced, and turn off generate. And of course make sure you hit apply on each one as we change them. Okay, we've got each of those set. Alright, so move on to the backgrounds here. And inside of this folder we should have materials, which will be empty at this point, and textures. And you may have created, again, using either that Spacescape program I mentioned in the first tutorial, or perhaps found your own. However you found them, go ahead and go to each of these and make sure the texture type is set to GUI. Looks like I've actually already set each of these, but if you need to, again, it's right under texture type here, just like we did advanced last time, just set it to GUI in this case. And we can ignore the detonator and explosions folder, those have stayed the same and there's nothing to change in there at this point. And go all the way down to the landing pad folder. And we'll once again go to the collision to start with here. And just check our size again to start. So maybe in this case, let's bring in one of the asteroids. One of the visible meshes in this case. Drop that in there. And bring in the power station. And just check its size. Oops. Sorry, not the collision. Let's bring in the under the mesh folder. There we go. Just check its size against your asteroid and make sure it looks about right. In this case, looks like that's as I want it to be, so that's fine. If all looks good there, of course, delete anything you brought into the scene just to keep it clean there. And then do the same thing we did with the asteroids. So we're setting to not import materials, and animations don't import. Same thing for the collision and the meshes, of course, on this. No material import, and don't import animations. Then we have currently a blank materials folder. That's fine as usual. We'll go right down to the textures. I've got a little girder texture in here we'll be doing some stuff with, just to bring a little more detail to the level. If you didn't have this already, don't worry, you can just use this one and take a look at it, maybe recreate your own if you'd like. It's just going to be a way to, like I said, add some more detail. So we want to change this from texture to advanced, of course. Turn off generate bitmaps, that's fine. And the same for each of these. Turn off generate bitmaps, turn off generate bitmaps. Okay, and you might have guessed exactly the same thing for the player ship. Just want to go through with this, all of it, in case anyone misses anything. But we're just turning off those materials and the animations. And turning off, oops, sorry, and the textures here, of course. Turn off generate bitmaps. There we go. Okay, so we have all of our folders in and set up here. And again, if you have your own custom items, just make sure they're somewhat along the same lines as that. They should match up pretty closely, especially if you were, following through the first tutorial. The exact folder structure doesn't matter. Don't worry too much about that. It just helps to make sure if you're watching this tutorial, you can see exactly how I'm putting things together. So it's best to do it that way if you can. Okay, so we have all the assets. Time to build the level, I guess. We'll start with the obvious basics, just the asteroids. We'll need to bring one into the scene, set up its collider, or each one, I'm sorry, into the scene, set up its colliders, then make a prefab of it. So we'll start that just by dragging the visual mesh in first. So under our asteroids folder here, we have the meshes. And start with the first one here. We'll just drag and drop it right in. There we have it. Just take a quick look at it, make sure. Sometimes I've seen models import with weird, back-sided polygons doing something a little strange, or the normal maps, or sorry, the normal smoothing groups are messed up. Never know. This one looks good in this case. So we'll just need to apply the materials to it first of all. So we'll go to our asteroids materials folder, and let's create a material. So right-click on the folder, go create material, and by doing that the material jumps right into the materials folder. No need to drop it in later or anything. And we'll call this material, let me check our textures so I can see. Okay, so we'll actually create a material, one for each of the textures that you have. Let's just call this rock cracked. And with it selected, the material selected, I can hit Control D a couple times just to make one for each of the textures that I know I'm going to have. And I'm just going to really quickly rename each of these so I have one for each. And again, I'm just following by the textures that I have here in the textures folder for the asteroids. Okay, so once you have each of those set, we'll need to just drag and drop in the textures right onto that. Onto the texture slot, of course. Pretty straightforward. There we have it, and now you can just apply whatever material you'd like to each of these, and you can always go back and change this later, of course. As always, just as simple as grabbing that material and drag and drop it right onto your object. You might notice if it comes in way too large or maybe small or just funny looking, you can go into the material and change the tiling on the X and the Y. Something a little better. Something like that. Maybe that's even a little too much. I'm going to go with 3 myself. I think that looks pretty good there. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and set up the colliders for this. So to do that, it's a little more complicated, but still pretty straightforward. Select the game object that you have for the asteroid there, right in the hierarchy, and we'll go to Component, Physics, and we're going to add on a Mesh Collider, wherever that went. There we go. Alright, and first it'll put in its own mesh automatically. However, if you turn on the convex button, you'll see that it goes a little crazy, definitely not what we want. And this is why we created these special collision meshes for each of these. And what we'll just need to do is drag and drop in the mesh for each of these that comes from its own. So you don't actually drop in the I guess you'd call it top level game object in this case. Make sure you tick down the little arrow. Actually, I may have lied. Let's see. Can we do that? Okay. A little different here. We're going to remove that mesh collider and do this slightly differently. We're actually going to bring in the entire collision mesh and then make sure that it's centered at the exact same position as the visual mesh. Sorry about that. A little bit of forgetting how I made my own game here. So just bring in again the collision mesh, which will have all these separate parts. Forgot that we had to do it that way. And then you can just drag it and make it a child of the top level asteroid itself. So now if I move that asteroid around, it of course keeps that with it. Just remember before you do that to of course make sure it lines up, everything looks proper, and it's set up to go. And then just make it a child. There we go. And we'll also want to set one more special setting on each of these collision meshes. If we go into the import settings on each one and change the generate colliders to be on, that way each one when they come in, go ahead and hit apply of course. Do that real quick to each of these. That way when they come in, you won't have to individually set up for each and every one of those child colliders in there. We won't have to do anything for each one. So just checking generate colliders and hitting apply. And now each of these will have a mesh collider. And we will just have to turn on convex to each one. A little bit tedious, but necessary in this case. And this is what we get for working with complex shaped objects. Okay, and now when you select the top level of that of this collision geometry, you'll see all the nice green lines going around showing everything for it. One more tedious and annoying step. We actually need to go through and turn off the mesh render for each, because obviously we don't actually want these to be visible in any way. So for each and every single one of these parts, we'll just turn that off. And now that they're all invisible, we have our nice shell going around here so that the player ship will bump into it just right. And we have the top level. So when we select up here, again, we can still move that all around just as one. Okay, so we have that all set up. It's ready to go. A little bit of tedious work, but well set. Let's go ahead and create a new folder actually and call it prefabs inside of the asteroid folder. And just drag and drop the entire crescent file from our, or whatever you might have named that asteroid, directly into the prefabs folder. And this is new to Unity 3.5, I believe. You can just drop it right in and it'll instantly create a prefab, which is a pretty slick way of doing it instead of having to create a prefab, drag and drop it onto it. So makes life a bit easier. Okay, so there we have that, and we're going to go ahead and just do the same thing for each and every one of the meshes that you have. And I will just fast forward my tutorial so you don't have to watch me do each of those. Just make sure, again, we're going through and of course set all the generate colliders to be on for each one, and then just turn off the mesh render and change the mesh collider to be convex. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then be right back. Okay, so we're back and now we've got all the asteroids imported real nice here. I just dropped them into the scene so we could take a look at them here nice and easy. So we've got all those, make sure they're all set up as a prefab of course in there, and of course we don't need them in the scene anymore. Just delete those. And next we want to do the power station, so let's close out the asteroids there and down to the, the landing pad. And we'll do basically the exact same thing. We're going to go and grab the mesh for it, drop it in, and grab the collision mesh for it, drop that in, and then of course under the collision mesh, we want to go ahead and turn on that generate colliders once again for the collision mesh part. Apply. And actually we'll do this the other way around this time just to sort of see how it works. If we have the power station in this case and we just go component, physics, and then that mesh collider that I tried to do the first time, and in this case since there's actually only one mesh for its collision, we can simply if you hit the little down arrow on the upper level of the power station, underscore UCX or whatever your collision is if you made your own, and just drag and drop the actual mesh right into that. And now you'll see that little green line pops up around it as if we had brought it in as a separate element, and it's good to go. That's all we need. Turn on convex of course. And we'll just need the actual material for this then. So under the materials folder in the landing pad, we'll create a new one and call this landing pad. And sorry if this is getting a little confusing. I named this both power station and landing pad, meaning the same thing but just different naming on my part. So take that I guess as a learn by my mistakes. Try to call things one thing at one time and don't accidentally switch it around. So landing pad, power station, same thing. So under the landing pad again we have the material, and we're going to go ahead and change this one to be a little more complex. If you click on the diffuse slot under the shader, and we'll make this a self-illum diffuse, or actually I'm sorry, a self-illum specular. And what this will do is allow the landing pad to glow even when there's no light on it or anything. It'll give it a really cool glow effect, and also be a little bit shiny as if it's made of metal in some parts. So we can drag on the diffuse map, which should be the underscore ds that I've created here, right into the base and gloss slot there. See it show up. And then the glow map into the illumination A map here. And by A it means that the illumination is actually in the alpha, so you'll see that this one shows up with absolutely nothing, but I've built it in the Photoshop to have a alpha map or an alpha channel that'll make this actually glow. And if you've created your own, again, don't worry about this too much. Just make this, if you'd like, just a regular diffuse map and drop the texture onto it and it'll look just fine. Something like that. But if you create a alpha channel for yours, you can in the diffuse map, if you create an alpha channel on that, it'll control exactly which parts are shinier. White is shiny, black is not. And then if you create another map and put an alpha channel in that one, it'll control which parts glow. So if I change this again from diffuse to a self-illum diffuse specular, or just specular, now we can see that we've got these nice glowing bits, and it's actually a little bit shiny, just in areas like on the pipes and some of these metal panels. So kind of a neat thing to do, makes it look just a little bit better, especially if it's going to be a somewhat dark game like this might be, depending on how you set up your lighting, I suppose. Okay, so we have our power station, and we're just once again going to create a new folder, prefabs, and drag and drop that right into it. Okay, got it set up, and we can just go ahead and delete that. And we'll move on to the player ship. And as always, same basic thing, generate colliders on that. We have the ship set up, I suppose. And let's just drag in the mesh. And we're going to set up the colliders. Once again, we can use the slightly more simple version of component, physics, mesh collider, and find the collider that we created for the ship and drag it right into the mesh slot right there. Make sure it's on convex. There we go. And then we'll have to set up the material. So, same treatment for the player ship. Under materials, new material of course, call it player ship. And we'll drag and drop in the texture. Make sure this is set on self-illum specular if you're using these maps, or if you've created your own with a specular and a self-illumination channel. Otherwise, again, diffuse is perfectly fine. Drop in the glow and drag and drop that right onto our ship, and there we have it. So our ship has the collision on it. One quick thing to note, you might be noticing that our collision doesn't really seem to match the ship, obviously, from a profile especially. And that, of course, is just because this is only basically a 2.5D game, you might call it, where it's only going to be viewed from the side. The player will never be moving left or right. So the only collision that actually matters is movement in this direction. So we can use a very nice and simplified collision mesh. That just is basically a box with a couple extra verts. And this is important because collision meshes can have a pretty big impact on performance, so you definitely want to make them as absolutely simple as possible always. Don't want to make anything work badly, but you definitely want to make sure they're very simple whenever possible. So that's why we're doing this, in case you were wondering why is that not fitting. So we have our ship. Once again, last in line, we'll create folder for prefabs and drag and drop it into there. Okay, so we've got our ship, we have the asteroids, we have all the platforms done. So we'll just want to maybe create some backdrops and start working on the actual levels in this case. So if we go ahead and create a new scene and save this as level 1 under scenes, and we'll start creating your actual first level now. 25 minutes into the tutorial or thereabouts. A bit of setup always required for anything, even just a little bit complex, but it's always worth it in the end. So let's, I guess, get that background put in. And the way I found is a great way to sort of fake some depth and parallax is just to create a simple plane in the background, apply texture to it, and have your camera move around just enough that it really looks like things are moving around in the background. So we'll do that by creating under game object, create other, just a simple plane. And then if you go into your rotate mode, and if you hold control and then click on the x-axis to move it, to rotate it, we can rotate in nice 15-degree increments, keep it nice and flat, and just turn it so it's of course rotated straight against the camera. And center it on the X and the Y and the Z. And we'll want to move it back to, I think, right about probably 100 on the Z. I'll take that back and say maybe 50. And then just scale it way up until it fills up your camera view. And this is something you'll probably end up tweaking later on, especially per level, depending how far the camera can move around and see. You want this to only just barely fill that camera view, and of course this will make a difference depending on what your aspect ratio is that you've decided for your game. Just get it so it fits just enough, and then a little bit more. Since of course as our camera is moving around in the level, we want it to never quite go outside the edges of that. Obviously you don't want to start seeing the background there. So we have that, and then under the backgrounds folder here, and in the materials, we're going to create a quick material, one for each of these backgrounds. And again, we'll just follow our list of textures here. So this one, in my case, is blue nebula 1. Hit Control D to make a couple more copies of this, just like we did the asteroid textures, and make one for each of these. Alright, and then just drag into their texture slot, whichever one goes with it, so like so here. And then we'll change the shader type from a diffuse just to a simple self-illum diffuse. And since we're not putting anything into the illumination slot, what this will do is make it constantly 100% bright. So if I drop this on here now, we'll see that no matter the fact that there's technically no lighting in the scene, it still looks perfectly bright. And that's exactly what we want in this case. It really shouldn't be affected by lighting at all, to be honest. What we could do is turn to unlit texture, but sometimes it doesn't work quite as well, so we'll stick just with the self-illum diffuse for this one. Okay, so we have a background, and this is basically how we're going to set up each level, is just drop in a background like this. You don't have to make a prefab or anything for this. It's pretty straightforward. You could, if you like, I suppose, again, drag and drop it right into your backgrounds folder and have just a simple plane, maybe actually call it something just to keep things organized. And then within your scene, of course, each time you want to change that for your level, just drop on whichever material you want it to look like. And let's actually not forget to change each of these to that self-illum diffuse. Changing each shader to self-illum diffuse. Okay, there we go. So we have our background. Might as well save that level real quick just to make sure. And then we'll want to drop in each of the asteroids that we want for this. And naturally, this is entirely up to you. Just go ahead and create whatever looks good. So under our prefabs here, just drop these in. And you're best off making sure over here in the transform properties that these are all at 0 on the Z, just to make sure we get them just right. And I'll just drop in one more in this one. Oops. And we're kind of seeing right away that we've got a bit of a problem with our camera here. These things are looking huge, so we might want to pull that camera back just a bit. Again, something that'll be totally up to you once we get onto scripting the player controller and such. That'll all be taken care of, and make sure we get it exactly as you need it. And just sort of pretend maybe you're playing the game here. See how that might look. Seems about right to me in this case. Might need to make this background a little bit larger. Okay, and I guess we'll want to, of course, put some lighting into this. Although first, we'll drop in the we'll keep on going with the meshes and bring in the landing pads or power stations, whichever we're calling them. Go ahead and drop those in, and place them wherever you think might be good and tricky to make the player have to get to. And here we have a problem that you might run into. My landing pad has come in backwards, naturally. If this happens, you got a handy method of fixing it just in case. Under these scale options here, if you change the Z, in this case because my Z is going this way and that way, as you can see the blue arrow here, and that is the direction that it's backwards on. If we make this -1, pow, it flips around to face the right direction. Handy little trick in case that happens to you, which it almost certainly will at some point. At the same time, on the X here, of course, you could do the same thing. If I swap that to -1, now I can make it, say I wanted to face directly that way. Good way to flip it around. And with these, you definitely want to make sure they're all exactly at 0 on the Z, or whatever you might have set your your asteroids to. That way when the player is floating around, they're never going to accidentally end up landing on the outside or inside or whatnot edges of that. We'll just want to make sure we keep a nice standard Z location, again along that blue arrow, for everything to be at. And just pull them in and out so the pipes fit in a pretty nice way. Okay, and I can just hit Control D on that to make a copy. Maybe place another over here. And perhaps the last kind of tricky one over on the edge. And I'll flip this one around, or rather flip it back. Oops, no I don't want to, do I? To keep it that way. And just so we have a little bit of difference, this one I'll keep normal and place up here. Alright, so we have our power stations, and the last thing we'll see is that obviously this looks pretty dull and boring in the camera view, so we just want to drop in some lights. And if you haven't checked out lights in Unity, definitely check out the CG Cookie Unity tutorial that we have on all the lights. Otherwise, pretty simple overview. Game object, create other, directional light is going to drop in like a sun or your main light. In this case, if I look at my background, which is always a good way to do it, looks like there is mostly some sharp, or the more amount of light is really coming from these blue sources over here. So I'm going to turn my light around so it looks like it's coming from that. Set its color. You can actually use the picker here and just grab a color exactly off that map. I've got a nice shine coming in that way. And it looks like the probably this purple is the sort of ambient outside light that everything else is. So we can set that up by doing something a little trickier. If you go into the file, edit, render settings, and under ambient light, I'm going to again use the picker and grab this purpley color. In this case, that's probably a bit too purpley, so I'm going to just sort of turn it down a bit. It's not quite so obvious. And of course, this is all just a matter of, tweaking until you get something that seems to be looking like something you want. Once you get it fairly close, you can always, of course, create sort of accent lights or mood lights, anything you'd like to bring in there. Just using the regular game object, create other, and any of these really, point lights, spotlights. I'd use both of those. Set them around your level. Always good to try and match what your actual background is, so they really feel all a part of the level and nothing's forced. I'm actually going to pull my main camera back a bit so I can see it a little better. There we go. One last trick we can do is on each of the point lights, you can set the render mode to important. It'll end up making them look a bit better. The only issue with that is the more lights you have, of course, especially if they're unimportant, it's going to, of course, chop down the performance a bit. So you'll have to kind of just test and see how it's running, and you might end up having to put some of these on either auto or not important, or just take some lights out. But always just something to tweak later on once you've got your whole game set up and sort of profiled out. So that looks pretty good there. One last thing I find looks pretty good is to add lights for each station. So if we select any one of these lights, make a copy of it, and I'm going to make it, oops, I just lost it. There we go. I'm going to make it a bit smaller by dragging down these little circles here. And put it somewhere close to the station. And give it a color that works with it. So now it really looks like those glow lights are having a neat effect on the actual station itself. Or sorry, on the asteroid around it. And then I'm going to make a copy to each one. There we go. So, of course, all of this is really up to you. Go crazy, make as many levels as you feel as you feel you like to. 10 or more really is more than enough, but you know, don't be afraid to get creative with this. Just like we did with the platforms, you can of course take these and rotate them. Make sure you only rotate them, of course, on the z-axis, this blue line here. If you start going in any other directions, it's going to really screw up the collision geometry, so we just want to rotate it in this direction. You can scale it if you like, that's perfectly fine, like so. And the same, we can always use negative values on the x or the z to flip it if you want to do anything like that. So there you have it. Go ahead and build up each of your levels. Once you have everything put together and ready to go, save the level and then go File, Build Settings, and Add Current, and you'll see it pop up in your scenes to build there. And then we can create a new scene and save it as our next one and create the new one. So go ahead and do all of that. Create just as many as you like, and then in the next scene, in the next tutorial, we'll be getting into the seriously exciting stuff, setting up the actual player ship, making it move around and interact with our whole world. So thanks for viewing, and check out the next one.